how important is getting a good night's sleep, or getting your beauty sleep, as they say? You might be surprised. Sleep disorders is what we're going to be talking about on this edition of Healthy Living, so stay with us. How well do you sleep every night? Do you get a full night's sleep every night and wake up refreshed and ready to go? Or are you like many Americans who maybe wake up several times every night, or lie awake for 30 minutes or more before you can even fall asleep, and once you are asleep, you wake up for no reason and then can't go back to sleep? Well, if you have any of these types of symptoms, you're not alone, because more than 70 million Americans have some type of sleep disorder. And that's what we're going to be talking about on this edition of Healthy Living. How important is a good night's sleep? And I have with me here Dr. James Metcalf, a neurologist here in Paducah, who's going to be helping us talk about all the sleep disorders and how it affects our lives. Thank you, Dr. Metcalf, for being with me.
Thank you.
First, we're just going to start out to introduce yourself and give us a little background about you and what you do.
I've been in Paducah since 1978, and I'm a neurologist. Sleep medicine's always been a part of my, interest. And so, I mean, it kind of ties in with the neurological conditions that I often see. And it's been one of the more satisfying parts of the practice, too.
Because it's so interesting. It's so interesting in researching this that you don't understand how important a good night's sleep is to a person. Why is it so important?
I don't know if anybody really knows the function of sleep, but lack of it certainly causes many people to have multiple problems, particularly lack of sleep predominantly will just cause you to be sleepy, of course. But beyond that, lack of sleep causes problems with your overall health, your heart health, your mental health, every aspect of your life. And of course, it can also be a danger to when you're operating equipment or car. It can be a devastating thing to shortchange your sleep.
Well, I read some things that said it can affect your nervous system or your immune system.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Again, there's so many functions of sleep that we don't really understand. I've heard that too. I'm not exactly sure of the science behind how it affects, for example, the immune system. All I can say is that if you lack sleep, or you're tired, or working as on a sleep debt, or you're not getting enough sleep, you are more susceptible to infection, to many things. So the science behind this is not really well understood. There's a lot of talk out there, and there's a lot of misconceptions, and there's a lot of pseudoscience or junk science where people, say an herbal this or that makes a difference, or their product makes a difference, but
and how well you sleep?
Yeah, basically how well you sleep. I think what we can say, though, overall is, we spend, or should spend, at least 1/3 of our, daily life or nightly life sleeping. That's not the case all the time. I think here in the United States, for example, and industrial nations in general, we have gotten away from that. This is a 24/7 society, and people they've put getting enough sleep on the low end of their priority list, and I think that has only advanced ill health and many problems that we face in our society today.
Well, I remember when I was a young girl, when at 12 o'clock the TV went off, there was nothing else on. So that's what you did. You turned off the television and you went to bed. And now in our lives, it's the internet's there constantly. The television's on 24/7. You can go down to Walmart all night long, anytime you want. And so just our overall society has just reduced how much we need to sleep, because there's so many other things going on.
A frightening statistic is that, our present generation is now gets more than we're 90 minutes less sleep than what we had in 1900. And when you think about it, you're right. Before we became highly industrialized, we centered our life around the day and the night and the natural cycles of the seasons and the sun and the moon and whatever. Now, there are no barriers. You can stay up late as you like, but the problem is you have to get up at a certain time, and that's the bugger. So we are getting, as a society, over an hour and a half less sleep than we were in 1900.
A day, an hour and a half a day less.
That's right. And that makes us a sleepier group of people, and that can have severe consequences.
So I don't know about you, but an hour and a half of extra sleep every day would really probably help me. And I have 2 children, and I don't sleep as much as I should. Since I've had children, I probably sleep a lot less than I did. When you hear new mothers say, well, I can't sleep because they're crying, or I can't sleep because they're too quiet.
Right.
So from the time that you have children, your sleep habits change just because of the nature of being a new parent.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk about the different kinds of sleep. I remember in elementary school learning about REM sleep and all of those things, but I couldn't tell you today what that means.
Okay.
So if you could just kind of give us an overview of that,
Okay.
what they are.
There are different stages of sleep, and when we first fall asleep, we go into a drowsiness, or what's called a stage 1 sleep, and that's kind of our transition. And a lot of times that's, we're just kind of in and out of that for a few minutes, and then we go into a deeper sleep called stage 2. Now, the important sleep that we have, the sleep that makes us feel like we're invigorated, is the deep sleep, or the stage 3 and 4 sleep, slow wave sleep they call it.
Slow what?
Slow wave sleep.
Wave sleep.
And children and young people make more of that than older people. After age 40, our ability to make slow wave sleep declines, and I don't think anybody understands why.
So slow wave sleep, what does that exactly mean?
Slow wave sleep is our restorative, our recuperative sleep. That's the sleep, the deep sleep that we need to feel rested. Most of the sleep, slow wave sleep that we get in the first 3 or 4 hours when we go to bed. And that's where we sleep the deepest. And then we pop out of either stage 2 or slow wave sleep and go into what's called a rapid eye movement sleep, or a REM sleep, which is our dream sleep.
Okay, so you have stage 1 where you're kind of in and out. Stage 2, and what is that? Stage
2 is intermediate sleep.
Okay.
And slow wave sleep is stage 3 and 4.
Okay.
That's our restorative sleep.
Okay.
And then about 2 hours into our sleep, or 2 to 3 hours, we go into what's called a rapid eye movement sleep. Rapid eye movement is, it's our dream sleep.
Okay.
Our eyes move erratically and wildly, but the rest of our body is largely paralyzed, except for our breathing muscles. The reason for that is that, when we dream, some of our dreams might be frightening, and it would be unhealthy for us to act out our dreams when that monster is chasing us. So we are actually paralyzed during rapid eye movement sleep, so we can't really physically act out our dreams. By the way, there is a sleep disorder called REM behavior disorder that can cause, there's a lack of paralysis, and it happens in older people, and they can often, in the REM sleep, being not paralyzed, they get up and start running and ranting around, and that can be very dangerous. A lot of people have been injured that way. But for the most part, rapid eye movement sleep is not our deep sleep, it's our dream sleep. Stage 3 and 4 is the real importance. It's all important.
So in the 3 and 4, when we're in our deepest sleep, we're not dreaming then?
No. However, there's a little caveat to that. Some of our so-called parasomnias that we see particularly with younger people, like night terrors, bedwetting, confusional arousals. Those things happen during our deep slow wave sleep. That's why, for example, when a 3 or 4 year old wakes up screaming and yelling, they're not in their dream sleep, they're in their slow wave sleep. But the next morning, they don't really remember having that because they're in such a deep sleep. So we can have some disorders called parasomnias in our slow wave sleep, but that's not our dream sleep.
So we'll talk about that in one of
Yeah.
the segments coming up, the parasomnias, as you call them.
Correct.
How much sleep do we need? You talked about the deep sleep, 3 or 4 hours. Is that normal? Is that what you're supposed to have?
Well,
how much does a baby need versus an adult?
Okay.
How does it all the way up
Okay.
from baby to adulthood?
Okay, when a baby's first born, they spend 2/3 of their life sometimes in sleep. A baby needs a lot of sleep to develop their brain. As a function of age, we need less sleep, and usually from adolescent on, we need at least 8 hours. I think most people do, although a lot of people function on a lot less.
Okay, so babies need a lot of sleep, then children, and then you're talking about adolescents,
I'm
teenagers.
skipping that now because I want to get back to it.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
From adolescent on, we need about 8 hours of sleep.
Okay.
Now, adolescents are a special group of people with a special group of problems. Adolescents need usually an extra hour or two of sleep, so they usually require at least 9 hours of sleep.
From age what to what? What'd you say?
Well, it's variable. I would say from age 12 to 18 or 19, this group of people, young people, need an additional hour, hour and a half of sleep to function correctly.
So 9.5 hours.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
But they hardly ever get it.
Right. And what happens when they don't? How does it, you said there's some legislation,
Yeah.
I can't even say the word now.
The problem young people get into with their sleep is their natural circadian rhythm changes from childhood to adolescence as they reach puberty, whereas when they're a young child, they can easily go to sleep at 7 or 8 o'clock. As your hormones kick in and you reach puberty or pubescence, generally your tendency is to go to sleep a lot later. So a lot of parents will say, well, go to sleep at 7 or 8, but at that age, they're not ready to go to sleep. They're ready to go to sleep 10, 11, or 12. However, the crunch they get into is that they have to wake up sometimes 5:30 or 6 to get to school. In Louisville and some of the other places in this state and other areas of the country, they're actually making the school time an hour or even more later. You know, for example, rather than having to go to school at 7, they go to school at 8 or even 8:30. And I think one place in California, it's not till 9 o'clock they have to go to school.
And they just stay later in the day.
Yeah, and that's physiologically more natural to them because say a kid needs 9 hours of sleep, but they can't go to sleep until 11 o'clock. Well, if they're going to get 9 hours of sleep, generally they should be up around 7:30 or 8, not 5:30 or 6.
So how do you combat that? Because here in Kentucky, students have to be at school at 8 o'clock. My daughter is 12. She's right
Yeah.
there on that edge. So by 9 or 10 o'clock still, she's ready to go to bed. So the older she gets, you say her body is going to not want to go to sleep till later?
You're going to see a change in her. You're going to see that she wants to go to sleep later. And it's not because of peer pressure. It's because of their physiology.
So their bodies change, that rhythm, what kind of rhythm?
Circadian rhythm.
And that's what exactly?
Circadian rhythm is our natural rhythm, our sleep-wake rhythm, or when our hormones are secreted, when our core body temperature varies. For example, our core body temperature reaches its lowest point at usually 3 a.m. We have a rhythm, and this rhythm is usually in tune with the sun, the seasons, the natural cycles of the earth. Now that we've become more of a 24/7 society, you know, we've broken that rhythm, sometimes with disastrous consequences. But getting back to the point of like your daughter, she's going to want to go to bed later because her hormones are going to dictate that. It's not because her peers are doing that.
So she's not going to be just being stubborn.
No, and a lot of parents, they don't understand that. They think that the physiology that the kid had when they were very young is going to be the same physiology they have when they're pubescent. Well, that's not the truth. That's not the case. So the crunch they get into, kids have an imposed early wake time, which is not compatible with their physiology. And I think truly it is better if you could have children going to school an hour or two later. I think you would see more rested, relaxed children, and from what I understand, the results of this have been outstanding. The kids have loved it, and they've performed better on their tests, and I think it's been a huge success wherever it's been imposed. I'm hoping Western Kentucky will get wind of this, and this will become part of the legislation. There's a lot of issues here, and I'm probably going to make some people mad by saying this, but it's just the truth. I mean, kids are in a fix when it comes to getting enough sleep. Now, what you can do during the day or night to help a child get more sleep, right. Try to get them to bed as early as possible, but understand it probably won't be till 10 or 11 that they'll naturally be able to go to sleep.
So you should have them go to sleep at 9 o'clock even if they can't go to sleep? No.
No, that'll only frustrate them. They're just going to lie in bed frustrated and agitated, and they're going to develop a conditioned insomnia where you're just going to make bad sleepers out of them.
Oh dear.
But when they do wake up early and they're sleep deprived, what I usually recommend is when they get home, a child can take an hour nap or a 45-minute nap, but that nap has to be limited to an hour or less, and it has to be at least 6 hours removed from their bedtime.
Wow.
Oh, it's not a must that they do that, but you'll be surprised at what that hour nap will do as far as restore their energy, their concentration abilities, and whatever.
Well, then you get into the problem of there's basketball practice, there's choir practice, soccer, all of those things that happen after school that if they can't come home and if they want to do those things and have a nap.
Yeah, I'm just saying
you're saying that we
maybe
should
the
do
way
it.
it should be. That's not the way it is.
That's the way we should do it.
What happens, and I think what we're leading up to, is how kids make up for their sleep is during the weekend. I mean,
okay.
I don't know how many parents come in and say my kid doesn't wake up till 5 p.m. in the evening, or 3 or 4. You know, they
worried something's wrong with them.
Yeah, but what they're doing is they're catching up on their sleep, or what's called their sleep debt, which is the sleep that we're deprived of. We have to make it up sometime.
Kind of like money in the bank, or
yeah.
Deficiency in the bank. You're gonna have to pay it sometime. Going to have to get
usually this is the way it usually works. The kids will load up on sleep on the weekend. They kind of get in tune with this natural cycle they have. They'll go to bed late and wake up late. Mm-hmm. And then Monday starts all over again, this horrible imposed thing where they have to wake up early again. They're pretty rested on Monday and Tuesday. By Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, they're very sleep deprived again, and you can just see it. If a kid in school on Friday is much sleepier than a kid on school on Monday, because they've gotten good sleep that weekend usually, or most of the time. And if they don't make up for it on the weekend or with a nap, they're going to make up for it in the classroom. They're going to have what's called micro sleeps, or 2, 3, 4 hour periods where they're just out of it, or their head drops, they're going to make up for the sleep.
Somewhere, sometime.
Yeah, the problem is, are they going to make up for the sleep going 80 miles an hour on auto drive in the middle of a drive home from school? Tragically, that's happened. And that's why we have to really, I think, understand that this doesn't only happen to kids, but kids are one of the sleepier people in our society right now, and we have to understand that.
Well, we're going to take a short break, and we're going to come back and talk about what happens when you have trouble sleeping. You can't sleep. What are the different types of disorders that bring about that? So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Healthy Living. I'm your host, Tammy Thompson, and on this edition we're talking about sleep disorders and how that can affect your life. And with me again, Dr. James Metcalf, a neurologist here in Paducah. Thank you again. We want to jump right into some of these sleep disorders, but at the break, the Director Dan put up the sleep tips, things to help you sleep better. And after we talk about this first sleep disorder, we'll kind of touch on that, and you can elaborate on that for me. But I wanted to read this scenario for you and see if this pertains to any of you out there. It's midnight and you're lying in bed for almost an hour. Your mind is busy with thoughts of tomorrow, next week, last week. Sleep is the furthest thing from your mind. 1 a.m., you're still awake. You turn over, get up, get a drink of water. 2 a.m., you're still wide awake. You sit up and pound your pillow. How many times have I done that? Flop on your back, check the clock. Still can't sleep. You're determined you're going to sleep right now, but it just doesn't happen. 3 a.m., you are more awake than ever. This is a classic sign of insomnia. And so, you know, at some point, almost everybody has probably had some or all of those symptoms. Just tell me a little bit about what insomnia is and how prevalent it is in this area and all over the world.
Yeah, I think most people have had crisis episodes in their life, death of a loved one, a grief reaction, divorce, job change, illness, where they've had their life changed or disrupted. And remember, sleep is a very fragile commodity. Sleep is very sensitive to everything we do, particularly stresses in our life. So anything that will affect how we feel about ourselves, our mood, will affect our sleep. And in those situations, which I think everybody's had, we have like a situational insomnia, we call it, where it's a short-term insomnia. And in those in those times, usually the crisis will pass. The grief reaction will get better, the job will get better, everything will get better, and the sleep gets better.
So that's just the occasional thing depending on your life. What's the difference but then there are those people that have it chronically.
Yeah. Now, in fact, most people who have insomnia chronically have maybe started out just having the situational insomnia, but they never quite turned the corner, and they became bad sleepers. The most common type of chronic insomnia is something called psychophysiological insomnia, and let me explain that long tongue-tied word. It's like Pavlov's dog. The dog had what's called a conditioned reflex. The dog, you'd ring a bell, and then you'd feed the dog. You'd do that 100 times, and ultimately, when the dog would hear the bell, the dog would salivate because the bell would indicate that food was coming. So actually, when you would uncouple the bell and the food, you'd ring the bell without the food, the dog would salivate anyway. Well, what happens when you become an insomniac is it might start out fairly, benignly, like you just can't sleep for a while, but then what happens, you start developing bad sleep habits, and you panic when things don't go right. You start, you just start developing maladaptive, behavior. You go to sleep, for example, when you're not sleepy. Then you get frustrated, and then you smoke before you go to sleep because you think smoking is going to relax you. You take a medication which really doesn't help you, and you become very desperate to achieve success. And sleep is one of these things. The harder you try to do it, the worse it gets. And so you have to understand, when you don't sleep on a given night, don't panic. It's not the end of the world. It's just, in fact, you might look upon it as a positive thing that, gee, I didn't sleep tonight, but boy, I'm going to be sleepy tomorrow night. I'll have a good, successful night's sleep. I'll get to sleep a little earlier because I'll be really tired. I think you have to look upon sleep like that. You don't let one bad night's sleep ruin you. But a lot of people are under the misconception, if you don't get that sleep that night, your whole day is going to be ruined. That's not true. You can go without sleep for periods of time. It's not healthy to go without sleep for long periods of time and to be sleep deprived night after night. But that expectation ultimately of not being able to sleep will become like Pavlov's dog. You go into the bedroom, suddenly you develop a dread of even trying to sleep because you know it's not going to be successful. And then you go into the bedroom, you plop down on bed, you shut your eyes, all these thoughts come rushing into your brain. You can't sleep, you get mad, you look at the clock, and it becomes
a vicious cycle.
Yeah, and it becomes more of a conditioned reflex. You're only living up to your expectations. You go to bed knowing that, gee, I'm not going to sleep, but I'll give it a try, and lo and behold, you don't.
So your mind is like your worst enemy. You go to bed, and your mind starts racing with all those thoughts, and you can't stop thinking these things, and then you get anxious, and then you get up and you toss and you turn, and
well, the cure to that is, I think the cure to that is to try to achieve success within acceptable ways, but don't just go out there and get desperate and become a bad sleeper, because once you're a bad sleeper, it's very difficult to break that habit.
Well, we had some of the tips, some of those things that you talked about being a good sleeper. If we can put those back up, Dan, some of those tips that we had at the break.
I think rather than just going through them,
Here they are. We'll just put those up there, and then you can kind of. I think the best ways to approach sleep or a bad night's sleep is don't feel like you have to go to bed at a certain hour. You don't. Like if you feel like, well, I got to go to bed by 10, I got to wake up at 6, I got to get 8 hours of sleep or else. If you get into that frame of mind, you're just not going to make it. What I usually tell people is develop a fixed wake time and center your life around that wake time, and don't let it deviate too much. In other words, say you have to get up at 6 a.m. during the weekdays. Okay, don't let it deviate more than 2 hours on the weekends. Like, don't sleep in past 8 a.m. Even if you go to sleep, say,
at 1 o'clock a.m. and you wake up at 6 and you get 5 hours of sleep and you're going to be sleep deprived, think of the next night. You'll be able to go to sleep earlier because you're tired, and ultimately your sleep cycle will get back into sync. Don't feel like every night is a must that you have to sleep. Work on it. If you develop a fixed wake time and don't vary that by more than 2 hours, you'll be a successful sleeper in most situations. That's why the Army is such a great cure of sleep habits. People haven't been able to sleep for years because they have to wake up with reveille they've got to wake up no matter how tired they are, but the next night they're going to be good sleepers because they've been active and...
Except for teenagers, because you said they need that extra sleep on the weekends.
Yeah, they do, but again, you can't let the teenager sleep all the way up into the afternoon or evening. You got to put a limit on that too, and maybe you could be generous and give them at most 3 hours, but don't let them get into a whole new, sleep cycle, because they may be on such a different cycle during the weekend, and then they have to come back to the weekdays and their cycle's completely messed up. You got to be very careful about that.
And what about, but those tips are very good, not to drink alcohol or smoking or
right.
Big meals before you go to bed.
Yeah.
And
now alcohol is a lot of people have used alcohol for years as a sleep aid, but the problem with alcohol, it has a very short half-life, and even though it might get you to sleep, it only lasts about 2 hours, and then you wake up worse than ever. You're if anything, more agitated, and you can even, be downright irritable because the alcohol's out of your bloodstream. So alcohol will get you to sleep, but it doesn't keep you to sleep. Of course,
same thing with sleeping pills?
Yeah. There is a role for sleeping pills when it comes to insomnia, and there are some really good sleeping pills now that the FDA has approved for daily use. I think the ones that we talk about now are Ambien and Lunesta. Mm-hmm. They don't have any habituating qualities. But most of the time, what you try to do there is with these sleeping pills, you try to establish success in sleep for a period of weeks or even a month. And then they're kind of like training wheels. You can take them off the sleep medicine, and see if the person can go back to their normal sleep pattern.
So you don't get addicted to Ambien or Lunesta?
Generally not. You can actually become psychologically addicted to it, like you feel like you have to have it or mm-hmm. you don't sleep, but you don't become physically dependent or addicted to it. That's right.
So you can wean people off of those, and then maybe they'll go back to that natural rhythm of sleeping again.
Yeah, there are situations where I've just had to have people on them indefinitely because literally they can't sleep without it, and particularly old people. I don't object to having them within limits use those kind of medications to get sleep, particularly mm-hmm. if they have severe pain or other issues that require there's no alternative to getting them a good night's sleep.
All right, well, let's move on. We have a few more minutes in this segment. I want to read some things about the next one. I've been told that I snore loudly. I've been told I stop breathing or gasp for breath while I sleep. I have high blood pressure. I sweat excessively during the night. I get morning headaches. No matter how hard I try to fall asleep, I still stay awake. I still fall asleep even after a full night's sleep. What might be the disorder that's describing?
Well, it's a disorder we hear the most about these days. It's sleep apnea, or obstructive sleep apnea, they call it. It's usually, well, now it's estimated 6 to 7% of the American population has sleep apnea to some degree. Certain people more than others. Males are more prone to it than females. Heavy people or overweight people are more prone to it than others. So what happens with sleep apnea? It disrupts your restorative or slow wave sleep. You're always waking up to breathe. You don't remember waking up to breathe, but you're continually going to sleep. You quit breathing. Your body won't let you continue to quit breathing, so your body wakes you up. then the cycle starts. And you have literally dozens.
And you have no concept of doing this?
No, because even though you're not in a restorative deep sleep, you're in a sleep enough that you don't really realize that it's happening to you. Usually the wife or the children or the family members will catch this and bring it to the attention of the person involved, and then when the person involved comes to the doctor and says, well, I'm sleepy, I have a headache in the morning, a light comes on now, and with most doctors that this could be obstructive sleep apnea. It's gotten so much publicity.
And is it just the throat? Why does that happen?
The upper airway in our body is a hollow muscular tube without cartilage, and some people, and there's a genetic predisposition here too, when they go to sleep, that muscle relaxes or over relaxes, and it's like when you're drinking a malt with a small straw. A lot of times if you suck too hard on that straw, the straw will collapse. Well, the same way with your upper airway. What happens is that muscular tube just above your Adam's apple, called the hypopharynx, it will over relax and close off. It collapses. And then the only way your body can bring it open again is to wake up enough for the muscle tone to come back. But then when you drift back to sleep, it over-relaxes again, and you go through this cycle dozens or even sometimes hundreds of times a night. And what it does, you stay in a superficial, fragmented sleep, a non-restorative sleep, and even though you're sleeping, the quality of your sleep is so poor that you don't really feel rested the next day.
So how does this affect the rest of your life, health-wise? If you cannot sleep because of sleep apnea, can it cause other health problems?
Well, sure. I mean, it will, first of all, being sleepy alone is a dangerous thing because you can fall asleep at the wheel of a car, and I think we've probably seen enough of that. Okay. But there are a number of other comorbidities, such as heart disease. It can make that worse. It can make diabetes worse. It can make your whole, it affects you in every way, shape, or form.
Because you'd have a stroke, things like that. I mean, heart attacks.
Well, people who have high blood pressure are more susceptible to have a stroke or have a heart attack. So, yeah, and it can cause severe cardiac arrhythmias too during the time you're in the sleep.
So how do you treat it? What do you do?
Well, the gold standard, of course, is an apparatus called CPAP or BiPAP. CPAP stands for continuous positive airway pressure. BiPAP is like CPAP, only the pressure varies between inspiration and expiration.
Is that the mask that you wear to help you breathe?
It's a little mask. It can be a full face mask or a nasal mask, and it's connected by tubing to a little compressor. And that a little incoming air current will come in, and it'll act as an air splint to your upper airway and keep your upper airway from collapsing. So it allows you to breathe and sleep at the same time. And people, the first night they have it, they go into a deep sleep and they wake up immediately feeling better the next day. It's an amazing, very satisfying thing to see people respond to that.
Now, isn't this something that you yourself have found that you have sleep apnea? So describe how your life has changed since.
Well, I guess I was in denial, but my wife, Debbie, brought it to my attention that I was snoring loudly. She saw me quit breathing, and I just wouldn't believe it.
And you are the doctor who sees it every day.
Yeah, and I accepted fatigue maybe as just part of my job. I've been conditioned to be a light sleeper, being on call and things. I thought, well, I'm just getting older. I'm just getting sleepier, but it was getting pretty severe at times. So Debbie insisted that I get a sleep study in my own lab at Lourdes, and I had severe sleep apnea.
So do you wear the apparatus?
I wear the apparatus, at night.
How has your life changed? Is it different now?
Amazing. I mean,
You had no idea?
No, I didn't. I just had no idea. And
And see, that's how everybody out in the audience, they're either in denial, they don't. I have someone in my family who has sleep apnea and doesn't want to wear the mask because he doesn't like, doesn't want to wear it. He feels strange wearing it at night, but it would really help him if he wore it.
Even
right?
if he couldn't wear it all night, if he could just wear it half the night, that would help. And if you could wear it just an hour or two, that would help. And there's so many different masks, comfort masks, and the pressure can be varied. I really challenge anybody to say that they can't wear it. I think there's ways that the treatment can be modified to make it work for you. There's no excuse for doing that. I mean, I won't. The patients that I see, I'm really in their face about doing this because it's so much better for them. Their health in general is so improved. Their quality of life is so improved. And I think once people have gone through a night where they've been treated and they wake up feeling 100 times better, they'll be happy to jump through that little hoop of wearing a mask like that.
Right. And not to mention your spouse will be really glad you're wearing the mask too.
Yeah, very much so.
Well, we're going to talk about one more before we take the break, and it's one that I've been seeing all kinds of commercials about, and it's restless leg syndrome.
Yeah.
The tingling, the burning. Explain what's going on in somebody's body when that's happening.
Restless leg has gotten a whole bunch of publicity lately, and it's a very prevalent condition, particularly in people over age 40. You can see it at a younger age, but it's a creepy, crawly feeling, an irresistible urge to want to move your legs. It can interfere with your sleep onset because you want to get up and just walk around once you start keeping those legs
Right.
still. You've seen the ad, Requip, and now Mirapex has been
Right.
approved. Before that, we used to use L-Dopa or Cinnamate for it. And
So rubbing just doesn't change anything?
Well, what really helps in restless leg, besides the medication, is just getting up and moving around. But you can't get up and move around all night. There's going to be a time when you're going to have to be still.
To go to sleep.
And it not always just during sleep. Some people you'll see will be sitting in a chair and they'll be moving their leg like this, and you know that they've probably got the restless leg too. But usually you don't have to treat it so much during the day. It's mostly at night.
Because if they can't sleep because they can't keep their legs
That's
still,
right. That's right.
It's just as bad as sleep apnea or insomnia or any of the others.
They used to relate that to iron deficiency anemia, but they've now found out there's more to it than that. It's a genetic thing. It seems to be tied into a deficiency of the dopamine system in your central nervous system. And the treatments are the medications that help Parkinson's, help restless leg, but I want to make people understand restless leg is not Parkinson's. The physiology is completely different, so don't confuse the fact that the same medication helps both conditions. They're very different conditions.
And it's okay to take those medicines
Oh, yeah.
for the restless leg syndrome.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're non-addictive. They're not nerve medicines. They're not antidepressants. They're just what's called dopamine agonists.
And it will help people to sleep better.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to take a short break here, and I want to come back and talk about those parasomnias that you mentioned in the first segment. And we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Healthy Living. Again, we're talking about sleep disorders with Dr. James Metcalf, a neurologist in Paducah. And I wanted to talk one more about, before we got to the parasomnias, about the sleep disorder called narcolepsy.
That's
and
correct.
what that is. And that seems to be a really dangerous one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's an inherited condition. Usually, sometimes you see it sporadically. It's fairly rare, but you see it enough that it is a very alarming condition, and it can start, in childhood, the teens, and the tragic part about narcolepsy, it usually takes at least 10 years to diagnose it in most situations or more.
Because you can't determine when they're going to fall asleep.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times a person with narcolepsy will be misconstrued as somebody who's just lazy or shiftless. And, we've always seen this person in class who's a sleepyhead who just seems to fall asleep whenever they sit still. And some of those cases, those are the narcoleptics that we see.
And do they just fall asleep just at any given time?
Yeah, it's an irresistible urge to fall asleep. It's a deficiency in our arousal system that we have in our brainstem, and the person with narcolepsy is born with a very weak arousal system, and their sleep system overwhelms their arousal system, and so they literally can't really fight it. They almost have to just give in to it, and when they do, it's called a sleep attack. And a lot of times a sleep attack will occur so quickly that they don't have time to pull over, or
Wow.
they'll just fall asleep.
So they could be driving a car
Yeah.
and just fall asleep.
And then they have other symptoms of narcolepsy, is something called cataplexy, where a high emotion or a scare or an unexpected event will throw them into a state where they lose their muscle tone and they'll fall to the ground. That's called cataplexy. They won't be sleepy, they'll just lose their muscle tone. That's why, some narcoleptics avoid, watching a thrilling game or being witness to a joke or whatever, and it can, if they start laughing hard or rooting hard for their team, they can fall into a cataplexy, and they lose muscle tone.
That is so sad.
Yeah.
How do you treat that? How do you
Well,
combat
fortunately, there's been a lot of good science that's come out with the treatment of it, and one of the newer medications that we have now is called Provigil or modafinil, which is a non-amphetamine medication, non-addictive, that can help them be more alert during the day. Before that, we had to use amphetamines, and there's so much stigma to taking amphetamines that a lot of times these people also became somewhat addicted to amphetamines, and the amphetamines would have an adverse effect on their personality. They'd become emotional or aggressive, or in rare cases would develop a psychosis when they were on the amphetamines. And this was just during their treatments. For the cataplexy, a new medicine called Xyrem has come into being, where it's somewhat of an inconvenience to take it because it's a liquid and you have to take it before you go to bed, and then you have to wake up 4 hours later and take it again. And Xyrem, unfortunately, is the date rape drug, gamma hydroxybutyrate. So you really have to have severe cataplexy to qualify for that, but some people do. And not everybody with narcolepsy will have severe cataplexy. Most of the time, a lot of times they won't. But, a lot of times it's just their sleep attacks.
But there is help. There is some medications that can at least improve their quality of life for those that have, and the cataplexy.
I would say right now that in this stage we can keep most people with narcolepsy alert and awake to the point that they can function. And also a big part of the treatment of a narcoleptic is enforced naps, where they actually will take a 10 or 15 minute nap at designated periods of time, and we try to work with their employers to educate them to this. And we even have some school children whom we've talked to teachers that we told them that the kid has to take a nap in between classes or whatever to stay alert. And And most people are very happy to cooperate with this.
Okay. Well, I wanted to talk about, you alluded to this in the first segment about the nightmares and the night terrors.
Yeah.
And they're very different. A nightmare is very different from a night terror. Is that right?
Yes.
I mean, explain the difference. I mean, I can have a nightmare, and how is that different if I were to have a night terror? What happens to my body that would be different?
Okay. A nightmare is a bad dream that happens during rapid eye movement or REM sleep.
Okay.
And usually we go through 3 or 4 REM sleeps a night. In other words, our sleep is not just one homogeneous sleep. You know, we have several REM cycles where we'll wake up in the middle of the night, and then we'll go back to a sleep. It'll be another REM cycle will punctuate the next, sleep that we get, and then we'll have 3 or 4 REM sleeps a night. Well, usually we don't remember the first REM sleep dream, but we'll remember the last one because it's pretty vivid. And a nightmare, usually you remember it because you wake up and it's horrifying you, or
And you can see it in color. You can remember every detail about it.
Yeah, all senses are on go. You can smell, you can see in color, you can experience fear, rage, you can be killed in your dream, you name it. You can do all these things. But luckily you're paralyzed during your REM sleep, so you can't get up and,
Okay, so my eyes are moving in the rapid eye movement, and all
your-
that's going on in my mind, but my body won't move. My body
except
stays stiff.
your respiratory muscles are moving.
Right.
But the rest of you is paralyzed, except in REM behavior disorder.
I mean, isn't there one where there's a sleep paralysis where you can't move at all and you want to, you try to move?
Yeah, now sleep paralysis is something I think somewhere along the line we all have experienced, where actually we wake up in our dream sleep and we can't move.
Right.
And that's not abnormal. That's a normal phenomenon.
Okay.
And that's so if you have that, a lot of people actually come to me for that. They say they wake up and they're paralyzed, and I say, well, that's just part of your normal physiology.
So that's okay. That's normal.
Okay.
It's very scary, though.
It's scary, but it's okay.
Okay. Now let's move to the night terror. That's very different. What is different about a night terror versus a nightmare?
A night terror happens during your deep or slow wave sleep, and night terrors generally happen more in youngsters, pre-pubescent youngsters, and usually it happens in the first 2 or 3 hours of sleep onset, where they'll wake up with a blood-curdling scream, and then you hug them or you caress them, and they're still screaming. They're pale, they're sweating, they're wild-eyed, and then.
And they look awake, but they're not. Is that right?
Their body's in motion, but their brain's not at home. Their brain is still in a very deep sleep, and you just don't get out of a deep sleep right away. It takes a few minutes to get out. But the good thing about a night terror is generally you don't remember it the next morning. And a night terror can be very irritating. I mean, not very irritating. It can be very disconcerting to the family because of the severity of the scream, and you're not paralyzed during a night terror. You are moving and you're active, and actually, people with night terrors can get up and sleepwalk. They can get up and run. Some of them there have been rare cases where they've jumped down the stairs or have actually hurt themselves.
Okay.
So, but usually you graduate from that and into a non-night terror type of a person. Usually when you reach puberty or slow wave sleep, the proportion of slow wave sleep decreases, and your tendency to have a night terror decreases along with it. It's just part of your aging physiology.
I've heard that you shouldn't wake somebody up who's in a night terror. Is that true?
Well, you can't. I mean, really, it's I think the best way to handle a night terror is to gently restrain or caress or hug until that person wakes up. And
so shaking and trying to, that would probably be
I don't
more
think
harmful than good.
I don't know if it'd be more harmful, but it's unnecessary, and you're not going to wake somebody up by shaking them or smacking them, they'll wake up on their own.
Unless they're trying to hurt you or hurt themselves.
But in most cases, you know, a person with night terrors is a younger, smaller person.
Dreaming of monsters and things like
that.
that.
Yeah, and a hug is more comforting. And I mean, you know, and when you hug, you're actually restraining a kid, really. I mean, but it's a benevolent restraint. So it's not necessary to panic.
Okay.
You know, now
don't panic.
Don't panic.
When your kid is screaming like that, try not to panic.
And unfortunately, you know, night terrors are usually not a sign of mental disorder or anything like that. They're more likely to occur when the child's very tired, goes to bed real tired, or if the child's had a bad day. A night terror is more likely to happen under those circumstances than more relaxed circumstances.
Well, we have about 3 minutes, and just briefly, the sleepwalking and sleep talking, again, with probably night terrors, people who have those, you might need to take precautions in your house that they don't fall down the stairs or go out the front door or things like that.
Know, there's sleepwalking that happens usually during slow wave sleep. At the same time, sleep talking can occur in any stage of sleep, stage 1 and 2. Sometimes people who sleepwalk will do very complex actions. Unfortunately, we've even had people who've actually gotten the keys off their desk and went for a drive when they're in a slow wave sleep and wrecked their car.
Oh my goodness.
And there's also been some homicides that have gotten a lot of publicity where a man or a wife would kill their spouse. And in some situations, that's actually happened.
And they're not awake and they have no idea.
That's right. And that has happened before, although I don't want people out there to think they can kill their wife just and say, well, I did it because I had...
I was asleep.
Yeah, I was asleep, yeah.
Right. Well, that doesn't work. They'd have to really prove that when they...
Yeah, you'd have to go through extensive testing.
Well, just before we go, we have about a minute and a half or so, and these are some things that I wanted to ask you from me personally. I take Tylenol PM, sometimes to help me sleep. Is that a good idea or a bad idea?
Well, it depends on what works for you. Now, Tylenol PM or Advil PM, all these PMs, they have the magic ingredient is Benadryl. It's usually 12.5 milligrams of Benadryl added to their product, such as Tylenol. The problem with Benadryl is, excuse me, the problem with Benadryl, it has a long half-life. And if you're going to take a Tylenol PM or an Advil PM, it's good to do it in the smallest dose possible. You might want to try a half of one rather than a whole one, and take it early. Don't take it late. Don't take it at midnight because you woke up and you can't go back to sleep. Because if you do,
about the time I'm supposed to be waking up is when I'm really wanting to be asleep.
Yeah, the Benadryl is going to still be in your system and you're going to drag. And in elderly people, Benadryl can have a very long half-life and last the whole next day. So now things like Ambien or Lunesta, they have a very short half-life, and those things will be out of their system when they wake up. You have to be careful with these PM over-the-counter medications.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Metcalf, for being with me. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
If you have any of these symptoms that we've talked about, please don't wait to get help. Getting a good night's sleep is probably the best thing you can do for yourself. So stay with us. No, don't stay with us. Join us next time on Healthy Living. I'll see you next time.